During my SATs, my teacher asked, "Are you sure you belong here?" The pencil trembled in my hand as Mrs. Henderson's shadow fell across my desk. The entire testing room had gone dead silent except for the soft scratching of number 2 pencils on answer sheets. It was 9:47 a.m. on a Saturday morning in October, and I was 3 sections into the most important test of my life. "Excuse me," she whispered, but loud enough that half the room could hear. "Could I speak with you outside for a moment?" My stomach dropped. I'd been grinding through these SAT questions for over 2 hours, riding on 4 hours of sleep and the stale coffee I'd grabbed from the gas station on my way to Jefferson High. My mom had worked a double shift at the diner the night before, so I'd taken 2 buses to get here, clutching my admission ticket like it was made of gold. I followed Mrs. Henderson's perfectly manicured figure out into the hallway, her heels clicking against the linoleum with each step. She'd been my AP literature teacher since September, and every interaction we'd had felt like a tiny paper cut to my dignity. While other kids got encouraging nods and extra credit opportunities, I got skeptical looks and comments about managing expectations. She closed the door behind us and turned to face me with that expression I'd grown to hate, the one that looked like she was smelling something unpleasant. "Marcus," she began, smoothing down her cream-colored blazer. "I need to ask you something, and I want you to really think about your answer." I stood there in my thrift store khakis and the button-down shirt my mom had insisted on buying new for this day, even though it meant we'd be eating ramen for 2 weeks. Through the small window in the door, I could see other students bent over their test booklets. Madison Chen was already on section 4. Tyler Rodriguez had his calculator out for the math portion. "Are you sure you belong here?" The words hit me like a physical blow. I actually took a step backward. "I'm sorry, what?" "Mrs. Henderson sighed, the kind of dramatic exhale that suggested she was being incredibly patient with someone incredibly slow. "The SATs, Marcus. These tests, they're designed for students who are planning to attend competitive universities. Students with certain backgrounds." She paused, letting that word hang in the air like smoke. "I've seen your family situation in your file. Your mother's occupation. Your address. My address. Maple Grove Apartments, Unit 23B, where the heat sometimes didn't work and you could hear the neighbors arguing through the walls. Where I did homework at our kitchen table that wobbled unless you wedged a folded napkin under one leg. I just want to make sure you're not setting yourself up for disappointment. Community college is a perfectly respectable path. There's no shame in knowing your limitations." I felt heat crawling up my neck. In the classroom behind her, I could see empty chairs where other kids whose parents were doctors and lawyers and real estate agents, sat confidently filling in bubbles that would determine their futures. Kids who belonged there, apparently. "The test costs money to take again if you don't do well," she continued. "Money that I imagine your family could use elsewhere." Something crystallized in my chest at that moment. Not just anger, though there was plenty of that, but something sharper. Something that felt like rocket fuel. "I'm sure," I said quietly. "Really? Because there's no shame in." "I'm sure I belong here, Mrs. Henderson." She studied my face for a long moment, her perfectly shaped eyebrows arching slightly. Behind us, I could hear the muffled voice of Mr. Peterson, the other proctor, announcing that students had 15 minutes remaining in the current section. "Very well," Mrs. Henderson said, but her tone suggested this conversation was far from over. "But Marcus, I feel obligated to tell you that in my 23 years of teaching, I've learned to recognize which students have a foundation for academic success at elite institutions." Foundation. Another one of her favorite words, right up there with background and realistic expectations. "My daughter Catherine scored a 1520 last year," she continued, adjusting the thin gold chain around her neck. "She's at Williams College now. My son Michael managed a 1490 his junior year and brought it up to a 1540 as a senior. He'll be applying to Harvard early decision next month." She paused, letting those numbers sink in. "Those scores come from years of preparation. Private tutoring. Test prep courses that cost more than." She glanced at my worn sneakers. "Well, quite a lot." The hallway felt like it was getting smaller. Through the window of the chemistry lab across from us, I could see the periodic table poster that had been there since my freshman year. Hydrogen. Helium. Lithium. I'd memorized that entire chart during lunch periods when I couldn't afford to buy food and needed somewhere to sit. "Catherine had SAT prep 3 times a week for 8 months, Mrs. Henderson went on. "Michael worked with Dr. Steinberg, he's the premier test preparation specialist in the county. Costs $200 an hour, but the investment pays for itself in scholarship opportunities. $200 an hour. That was more than my mom made in an entire shift at Riley's Diner, before tips. I'm just saying that perhaps your time might be better spent focusing on schools that would be a better fit. State schools have wonderful programs. And the application fees alone for Ivy League institutions can be quite substantial. $75 to $90 each, not including the CSS profile costs for financial aid applications." I did the math automatically. Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Columbia. If I applied to just 4 reach schools, that was over $300 in application fees alone. Money we didn't have. Money that Mrs. Henderson probably spent on lunch without thinking twice. "The thing is, Marcus," she said, lowering her voice to what she probably thought was a kindly whisper, "these institutions have cultures. Traditions. They draw from certain types of families, certain types of communities. Students arrive with shared experiences, summer homes in the Hamptons, skiing in Aspen, spring breaks in Europe. They speak the same language, if you understand what I mean." I understood exactly what she meant. Even if you were to somehow gain admission, which, statistically speaking, is quite unlikely given your circumstances, you'd be out of place. Uncomfortable. It would be setting you up for 4 years of feeling like you don't belong. The hallway clock showed 10:23 a.m. I'd now missed almost 10 minutes of testing time. 10 minutes that could make the difference between a score that opened doors and one that confirmed every assumption Mrs. Henderson had ever made about kids like me. "I need to get back to my test," I said. She tilted her head slightly. "Are you certain? Because once you go back in there, you're committed to finishing. And when those scores come back in 6 weeks." She shrugged delicately. "Well, I just hope you won't say I didn't try to help you avoid disappointment. I reached for the door handle. I'm certain. The testing room felt different when I walked back in. Every head turned toward me, and I could practically feel the curiosity radiating from the other students. Madison Chen gave me a questioning look. Tyler Rodriguez had stopped mid-calculation to stare. Even Jessica Morrison, who usually acted like I was invisible, was watching me with obvious interest. Mrs. Henderson followed me back in, her heels announcing our return with sharp little clicks. She moved to the front of the room and made a show of checking her watch, a silver Cartier that probably cost more than our monthly rent. You have 11 minutes remaining for section 4, she announced to the room, but her eyes stayed fixed on me. I slumped back into my seat and stared down at my answer sheet. The bubbles I'd filled in so carefully seemed to mock me now. Questions 23 through 35 sat blank, waiting for answers I'd never had the chance to give. My pencil felt foreign in my hand, like I'd forgotten how to hold it properly. The math problems swam in front of my eyes. Something about compound interest and exponential growth, topics that felt cruelly appropriate given the conversation I'd just endured. I forced myself to focus, but Mrs. Henderson's words kept echoing in my head. Are you sure you belong here? Around me, pencils scratched frantically as other students rushed to finish. I could hear the soft whisper of erasers correcting mistakes, the barely audible sighs of frustration, the confident tapping of calculators. These were sounds I should have been making too, instead of standing in a hallway being told I was aiming too high. 5 minutes remaining, Mrs. Henderson called out. Panic shot through me. I'd managed to answer maybe 3 questions since coming back. 3 questions out of 12. I started bubbling in answers randomly, my heart hammering against my ribs. C, A, B, D. The letters meant nothing now, they were just desperate marks on a page. When time was called, I wanted to throw up. The break between sections felt endless. Students clustered in small groups, comparing answers and strategies. I heard snippets of conversation that made my stomach twist tighter. Did you get 847 for number 31? The Princeton Review book totally prepared me for that geometry section. My tutor said the October test is usually easier than December. Tutors. Prep books. These kids talked about $500 test preparation courses like they were discussing lunch plans. Meanwhile, my preparation had consisted of a borrowed prep book from the library, one that was missing pages 127 through 156, and whatever practice questions I could find online during my shifts at the grocery store. I found a corner near the water fountain and tried to steady my breathing. Through the window, I could see the parking lot filled with cars that probably cost more than my mom would make in 2 years. BMWs, Mercedes, a few Teslas scattered throughout. I'd arrived on the number 47 bus and would leave the same way, assuming I could scrape together the $2.50 for fare. My phone buzzed with a text from my mom. How's it going, baby? Thinking of you. Red heart. She was probably on her lunch break at the diner, scarfing down whatever the cook had messed up so she wouldn't have to pay for a meal. She'd been talking about this test for weeks, telling her regular customers about her son who was going to be the first in the family to go to college. The pride in her voice when she said it made my chest tight. I couldn't let her down. I couldn't let Mrs. Henderson be right. When we filed back in for section 5, I made myself a promise. Whatever happened with the section I'd already butchered, I wouldn't give up. I wouldn't prove her point. But as I settled back into my seat and saw Mrs. Henderson watching me with that knowing expression, I wondered if I was just delaying the inevitable. The reading comprehension section stared back at me like a wall of incomprehensible text. Usually, this was my strongest area. I'd been devouring books since I learned to read, spending countless hours in a public library because it was free and quiet and nobody questioned whether I belonged there. But now, the words seemed to swim on the page. The first passage was about economic inequality in Victorian England. Of course it was. I could feel Mrs. Henderson's eyes on me as I tried to focus on the text. She'd positioned herself at the desk with a perfect angle to watch my section of the room, and every time I looked up, she was there, observing. Waiting for me to prove her right. The questions were brutal. Not because they were necessarily harder than what I'd practiced, but because every single one seemed designed to highlight the exact gaps in my knowledge that Mrs. Henderson had just spent 10 minutes pointing out. A passage about elite university traditions. Questions referencing cultural touchstones I'd never experienced. Vocabulary that felt deliberately exclusionary. Halfway through, my pencil tip snapped. The sharp crack echoed louder than it should have in a silent room. Several heads turned toward me, including Madison Chen, who gave me a sympathetic wince. I fumbled in my backpack for the backup pencil I'd brought, a cheap mechanical one from the dollar store that had been jamming all morning. Is there a problem? Mrs. Henderson's voice cut through the silence. No ma'am, just my pencil broke. She walked over, her heels clicking against the floor like a countdown timer. The entire room was watching now, 37 students witnessing my latest failure. She stood beside my desk for what felt like an eternity, looking down at my answer sheet. You seem to be struggling, she whispered, just loud enough for the nearby students to hear. My answer sheet was a mess. Half-erased marks, bubbles filled in too lightly, and several blank spaces where I'd lost focus. It looked exactly like what she expected from someone like me. I'm fine, I managed. She lingered for another moment before returning to her desk. But the damage was done. I could feel the shift in the room's energy. Other students had gone back to their tests, but there was a new awareness now. They'd witnessed something, and it wasn't pretty. I forced myself to keep reading, but the next passage was even worse. It was an excerpt from a piece about social capital and educational achievement, the kind of academic writing that felt like it was describing my life from a laboratory perspective. The author discussed how students from disadvantaged backgrounds often struggled with cultural capital deficits in elite educational environments. Question 47 asked about the author's use of the phrase, inherited advantages. The irony was so thick I almost laughed. 20 minutes remaining. I was behind, badly behind, and starting to panic. Around me, other students were moving through the questions with the kind of confidence that comes from years of preparation I couldn't afford. Tyler Rodriguez was already on the final passage. Madison Chen was checking her answers, which meant she'd finished with time to spare. My mom's face flashed in my mind. She'd been so excited about this test, had saved for 3 months to pay the registration fee. She'd even called in a favor with her manager to get Saturday morning off so she could drive me here, except our car had died 2 days ago and we couldn't afford the repair. "You're going to show them, baby," she'd said last night over our dinner of canned soup and saltines. "You're going to prove you're just as smart as any of those other kids." But sitting here, watching Mrs. Henderson check her expensive watch while I struggled through questions that seemed designed to exclude people like me, I wondered if my mom's faith was misplaced. The final passage was about perseverance in the face of adversity. Under any other circumstances, I might have found it inspiring. The passage was about a sharecropper's son in 1920s Alabama who taught himself to read using discarded newspapers and eventually became a federal judge. The questions that followed were designed to test reading comprehension, but they felt like they were testing something else entirely, my right to dream beyond my circumstances. Question 52, the author's reference to bootstrapping is intended to illustrate which concept? I stared at the multiple choice options, and suddenly everything clicked. This wasn't just about reading comprehension. This was about understanding the coded language of success, the vocabulary of upward mobility that kids like Tyler and Madison had been absorbing since birth. They didn't just know the right answers, they understood the cultural context that made those answers obvious. But here's what Mrs. Henderson didn't know about me: I'd been translating between worlds my entire life. When my mom worked the breakfast shift, I'd sit in the back booth at Riley's Diner doing homework while she served coffee to construction workers heading to job sites. I'd learned to switch between a casual conversation of blue-collar regulars and the formal language teachers expected in my essays. I'd been code-switching before I even knew what that term meant. The sharecropper's son in the passage, I understood his story in ways that went beyond mere comprehension. When the author described him studying by candlelight because electricity was too expensive, I thought of my own nights reading library books by phone flashlight when our power got cut off. When he wrote about the character's determination to prove the doubters wrong, I felt it in my bones. I started answering with a confidence I'd lost in that hallway conversation. A, C, D, B. Each bubble filled in with deliberate precision. 15 minutes remaining, Mrs. Henderson announced. I was going to make it. Barely, but I was going to finish this section. That's when I noticed Tyler Rodriguez looking over at my answer sheet. It was subtle, just a quick glance to his left while pretending to stretch his neck. But I caught it, and more importantly, I saw him adjust his own answer for question 48 to match mine. Tyler, whose parents owned 3 car dealerships and who'd scored a 1480 on his SAT. Tyler was copying from me. My heart hammered for a different reason now. If Mrs. Henderson caught him cheating off my paper, would she assume I was the one doing something wrong? Would she invalidate my entire test? I shifted my answer sheet closer to my body and kept working. Question after question, I found my rhythm. The cultural references that had seemed impossible 20 minutes ago now felt like puzzles I could solve. I might not have been to the Hamptons, but I'd read about them. I'd never been skiing in Aspen, but I'd devoured enough books to understand the references. That's when it hit me: I actually had been preparing for this test my entire life. Every night I'd stayed up reading instead of watching TV. Every hour I'd spent in the library while my mom worked double shifts. Every essay I'd written, every book report, every AP practice exam I'd taken online using the school's computers after hours. Mrs. Henderson had been wrong about something crucial. She thought privilege was the only preparation that mattered. 5 minutes remaining. The last few questions came easier than they should have. Maybe it was adrenaline, or maybe it was something else, a clarity that came from realizing I belonged here not despite my background, but because of it. The struggles she'd listed as disadvantages had actually taught me to think differently, to find solutions other students might miss. When time was called, I set my pencil down with steady hands. But as students began filing out for the final break, Tyler Rodriguez caught my arm. "Hey," he whispered, glancing nervously toward Mrs. Henderson. "I need to ask you something about Section 4. My stomach dropped. This couldn't be good. Tyler pulled me aside near the lockers, away from the cluster of students discussing answers. His usual confident demeanor had cracked, revealing something desperate underneath. "Look, I know this is weird, but..." He ran his hand through his perfectly styled hair. "I think I bubbled the entire math section wrong. Like, shifted everything down one line or something. I realized it during the break." My mind reeled. Tyler Rodriguez, whose dad owned Rodriguez Auto Group and whose mom was on the school board, was having a meltdown about the SATs. The same Tyler who'd gotten a 1480 on his SAT without breaking a sweat. "I can't retake this thing," he continued, his voice getting higher. "Early decision applications are due in 3 weeks. If I don't get into Northwestern, my dad will literally kill me. He's already ordered the car decals." I stared at him. "What do you want me to do about it?" "I saw some of your answers during that last section. You know your stuff, Marcus. Way better than most people give you credit for." He glanced around nervously. "Look, my family knows people on the testing board. If there was some kind of irregularity with today's test, they could arrange for our entire room to retake it next weekend." The hallway seemed to tilt slightly. "What kind of irregularity?" "Nothing major. Just something that would invalidate the scores for everyone in room 237. A proctor error, maybe. Or if someone reported suspicious activity during the test." I felt cold. "You want me to help you cheat?" "Not cheat. Just reset. Give everyone another shot." His eyes were wide, almost pleading. "I could make it worth your while. My dad's always looking for part-time help at the dealership. $15 an hour, flexible schedule. That's like, what, double what you make at Murphy's Grocery? $15 an hour. I currently made $8.50 stocking shelves and collecting shopping carts. The extra money could help my mom with rent, maybe even let us fix our car." But the way Tyler was looking at me, like I was something he could buy, made my skin crawl. "I can't do that, Tyler." His expression hardened. "Think about it, Marcus. Henderson's been riding you all year. Everyone knows she doesn't think you belong in AP classes. If I told her I saw you looking at other people's papers during Section 4, the threat hung between us like a loaded gun. Mrs. Henderson would believe Tyler without question. His word against mine wasn't even a contest. You wouldn't. I don't want to. But Northwestern is my life plan, man. I've had the same acceptance letter dream since I was 12. My girlfriend's already planning to transfer their junior year. I've got everything riding on this. Before I could respond, Jessica Morrison appeared beside us, her face flushed with excitement. Oh my god, you guys, did you hear? Madison Chen thinks someone was cheating during Section 5. She saw weird movement in the back rows and she's thinking about reporting it. Tyler went pale. Reporting it to who? Henderson, obviously. Madison's dad went to Yale, he always tells her to report anything that could compromise test integrity. Jessica's eyes glittered with the kind of gossip-fueled energy that could destroy lives. Apparently if there's any suspicion of cheating, they can invalidate everyone's scores and make us all retake it. My heart stopped. Not because of the cheating accusation, but because I suddenly realized what this meant. If our scores got invalidated, I'd have to come up with another $60 registration fee. Money we didn't have. Money that would mean my mom eating ramen for another month. But Tyler looked relieved. That might not be the worst thing, he said carefully. Are you insane? Jessica laughed. Do you know how much my test prep cost? If I have to take this again, my parents will make me do another 6 weeks with Dr. Steinberg. That's like $3,000. $3,000. For test preparation. I wanted to throw up. 5 minutes until final section, came Mrs. Henderson's voice over the intercom. As we headed back toward room 237, Tyler grabbed my arm one more time. Think about what I said, Marcus. About the irregularity. It could help both of us. But as I walked back into that classroom, seeing Mrs. Henderson's expectant smirk, I realized Tyler was wrong about one thing. This wasn't going to help both of us. This was going to define who I really was. The writing section was supposed to be my strongest area. 25 minutes to craft an essay arguing whether adversity builds character or destroys potential. The irony wasn't lost on me as I stared at the prompt, my hand still shaking slightly from Tyler's threat. Around me, pencils were already moving. Madison Chen had dove straight into her outline, her handwriting neat and confident. Jessica Morrison was crafting what looked like a perfectly structured introduction. Even Tyler, despite his earlier panic, seemed to have found his footing. I glanced up at Mrs. Henderson, who was making her rounds with clipboard in hand. Every few steps, she'd pause to observe a student's progress, occasionally nodding approvingly. When she reached Madison's desk, she lingered, reading over her shoulder with obvious satisfaction. When she got to mine, her expression shifted. Interesting approach, she murmured, though I hadn't written anything beyond my name yet. The prompt stared back at me. Does adversity build character or diminish human potential? Support your position with evidence from literature, history, or personal experience. 24 minutes remaining. I started writing. Adversity doesn't build character, it reveals it. The words flowed faster than they should have, fueled by everything that had happened in the last 3 hours. I wrote about Frederick Douglass teaching himself to read in slavery, about my mom working double shifts so I could take AP classes, about the difference between obstacles that strengthen you and barriers designed to keep you out. 15 minutes in, Mrs. Henderson stopped at my desk again. Marcus, she whispered, leaning down so only I could hear. I've just received some concerning information about irregularities during today's testing session. My pencil froze mid-sentence. Around us, other students continued writing, oblivious to the bomb she'd just dropped. Madison Chen approached me during the break with some observations about suspicious behavior. Looking around, possible communication between test takers. Her voice was honey-sweet, but her eyes were calculating. Of course, I told her I'd been monitoring the room carefully and hadn't noticed anything myself. But these accusations, they have to be investigated. My throat felt like sandpaper. Okay. The thing is, if someone were to come forward voluntarily about any mistakes they might have made, that would show integrity. Maturity. The kind of character colleges value. She straightened up, adjusting her blazer. But if accusations are made and an investigation finds wrongdoing, well, that's a very different situation. She was giving me an out. Confess to cheating I hadn't done, and she'd make the problem disappear. Keep fighting, and she'd let Madison's accusation destroy me. I hadn't done anything wrong, I said quietly. Of course not. But perceptions matter, Marcus. And sometimes it's better to take responsibility proactively rather than let situations escalate. 18 minutes remaining. My essay was half finished, and my hands were trembling again. I need to keep writing. Mrs. Henderson smiled that cold smile. Of course. But think about what I said. The window for voluntary disclosure closes when this test ends. As she walked away, I caught Tyler Rodriguez's eye. He was watching our conversation with obvious interest, his own essay forgotten. When Mrs. Henderson moved out of earshot, he mouthed something at me, last chance. I turned back to my paper and kept writing. But now every word felt weighted with consequence. I was writing about adversity while living it, arguing about character while mine was being tested in real time. True adversity doesn't give you choices between easy and hard, I wrote. It gives you choices between right and wrong, with consequences either way. 10 minutes remaining. Around me, students were wrapping up their conclusions. I still had 2 paragraphs to go. But for the first time all day, I knew exactly what I was going to do. And Mrs. Henderson wasn't going to like it. With 7 minutes left, I made my decision. I finished my essay with a conclusion that felt like throwing down a gauntlet. The measure of character isn't whether you face adversity, but whether you compromise your integrity when the stakes are highest. As pencils went down around the room, Mrs. Henderson began collecting test booklets with ceremonial precision. When she reached my desk, she paused. I hope you've given some thought to our earlier conversation, she said under her breath. I have. Her eyebrows lifted expectantly. And I've decided to report what really happened today. The color drained from her face. Excuse me. I stood up, my test booklet in hand, and spoke loudly enough for the nearby students to hear. I need to report an irregularity that occurred during Section 4. The room went dead silent. Madison Chen's head snapped up. Tyler Rodriguez looked like he was going to be sick. Even Jessica Morrison stopped packing her designer bag to stare. Marcus, Mrs. Henderson said carefully, perhaps we should discuss this privately. No ma'am. This needs to be official. I pulled out my phone and opened the voice recorder app I downloaded during the break. At approximately 9:47 a.m., you removed me from the testing room and advised me that I didn't belong here because of my family's financial situation and my address. You told me I should consider community college instead because students like me lack the foundation for elite institutions. Mrs. Henderson's face went white, then red. That's not, you're mischaracterizing. You said your daughter scored a 1520 and your son scored a 1540, and that those scores came from $200 per hour tutoring that my family couldn't afford. You suggested I was wasting money on application fees and would be out of place at schools with students who vacation in the Hamptons. By now, every student in the room was staring. Madison Chen had her own phone out, recording. Tyler Rodriguez looked like he wanted to crawl under his desk. You caused me to miss 11 minutes of Section 4 while you explained why kids from Maple Grove apartments don't belong at Ivy League schools. Mrs. Henderson's hands were shaking now. This is highly inappropriate. These conversations were meant to be helpful guidance. Helpful guidance would have been offering me information about fee waivers or test prep resources. What you did was discriminatory harassment designed to make me quit. The room was so quiet you could hear the clock ticking. Mr. Peterson, the other proctor, had emerged from the back corner where he'd been organizing materials. What's going on here? He asked. I'm filing a formal complaint about testing irregularities, I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. Mrs. Henderson removed me from the testing environment for non-disciplinary reasons and provided counseling based on my socioeconomic status that was designed to discourage me from continuing. Mr. Peterson's expression shifted. As the head of the guidance department, he knew exactly how serious this was. Mrs. Henderson, is this accurate? I was providing realistic guidance to help this student avoid disappointment. During the SAT. His voice got sharp. You removed a student from active testing to discuss their college plans. It was only for a few minutes. Ma'am, that's a clear violation of College Board protocols. Any interruption of the testing process for non-emergency reasons is grounds for score invalidation. He turned to me. Mr. Washington, how much testing time did you lose? 11 minutes of Section 4. The math section. Mr. Peterson looked sick. This entire room's scores are going to have to be reviewed. That's when Tyler Rodriguez stood up. Actually, Mr. Peterson, I need to report something too. All eyes turned to him. His face was pale but determined. I made a bubbling error on Section 4. Shifted my entire answer sheet down one line. I've been panicking about it all day, and... He glanced at me, then back at Mr. Peterson. And I tried to pressure Marcus into helping me get the scores invalidated so I could retake it. The silence that followed was deafening. I offered him money. Threatened to accuse him of cheating if he didn't help me. I was desperate because early decision deadlines are coming up, but that's no excuse. Mrs. Henderson was staring at Tyler like he'd grown a second head. Madison Chen had stopped recording and was just gaping. So let me get this straight, Mr. Peterson said slowly. We have proctor misconduct, attempted coercion between students, and potential score irregularities. He rubbed his forehead. This is going to require a full investigation. That's when I realized something that made me smile for the first time all day. Mrs. Henderson had just handed me exactly what I needed to prove her wrong. The investigation that followed was swift and thorough. Within 48 hours, I received a call from Dr. Patricia Williams, the regional testing director for the College Board. She had a voice like warm honey, but I could hear the steel underneath. Mr. Washington, I want to personally apologize for what happened during your testing session. What Mrs. Henderson did was not only inappropriate, it was a direct violation of federal testing protocols and our non-discrimination policies. I was sitting at our wobbly kitchen table, the same one where I'd studied for this test. My mom hovered nearby, pretending to fold laundry while obviously listening to every word. We're offering you 3 options, Dr. Williams continued. First, we can invalidate your scores and provide a full refund plus a free retake. Second, we can score your test as is and provide documentation of the irregularities for your college applications. Third, we can arrange for you to complete only Section 4 under proper supervision, then combine it with your other sections. My heart hammered. What would you recommend? Honestly? Your scores on Sections 1, 3, and 5 were exceptional. Even with the time you lost in Section 4, your overall performance is remarkable. She paused. If you choose option 3, you'd retake just the math section. But Marcus, may I call you Marcus? I've seen your preliminary scores. You might not need to retake anything. That evening, Tyler Rodriguez showed up at our apartment. I opened the door to find him standing in our narrow hallway, looking completely out of place in his pressed khakis and polo shirt. He was holding an envelope and shifting nervously from foot to foot. Hey, he said awkwardly. Can we talk? My mom appeared behind me, dish towel in hand. Who's this, baby? Tyler Rodriguez, ma'am, he said, extending his hand with the kind of polite formality rich kids learned in etiquette classes. I go to school with Marcus. She shook his hand, her expression curious but guarded. Any friend of Marcus's is welcome. Y'all want some sweet tea? No thank you, ma'am. I actually just came to give Marcus something. He handed me the envelope. Inside was a check for $500, made out to me, signed in his careful handwriting. Tyler, what is this? It's what I would have paid you. For the job at my dad's dealership. He shoved his hands in his pockets. I know you didn't take the deal, but you could have ruined me completely yesterday. When Mr. Peterson asked if anyone else had anything to report, you could have told them I was trying to bribe you. My mom's eyebrows shot up. Bribe you for what? Mom, it's complicated. Tyler looked miserable. Mrs. Washington, your son has more integrity than anyone in our entire class. Including me. He turned back to me. Northwestern rescinded my early decision eligibility because of the investigation. I have to apply regular decision now, and my dad's furious. But honestly, I deserved it. I stared at the check. $500 would cover our electric bill, groceries for a month, and maybe even the car repair we'd been putting off. But taking money from Tyler felt like accepting charity, and I'd had enough of people making assumptions about what I needed. I can't take this. Please. It's not charity, it's restitution. For trying to drag you down with me. His voice cracked slightly. You were the only person in that room who actually earned their score, and I tried to mess that up because I was scared. My mom stepped forward. Honey, what exactly happened during this test? I looked between her worried face and Tyler's desperate one, and realized the investigation was just the beginning. The real reckoning was still coming. 3 days later, I got the call that changed everything. I was restocking cereal boxes at Murphy's Grocery, my usual after-school shift, when my phone buzzed. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize with a 202 area code, Washington, D.C., Marcus, Washington. This is Janet Chen from the Washington Post Education Desk. My hands went numb. Madison Chen's aunt was a journalist, and apparently Madison had shared more than just concern about test irregularities with her family. We're running a story about discrimination in standardized testing environments, and your case has come to our attention. The college board provided a statement confirming that a proctor was removed from duty pending investigation. Would you be willing to comment? I nearly dropped my phone into a display of Cheerios. Can you hold on a minute? I ducked into the employee break room, my heart pounding. A Washington Post story meant this wasn't staying local anymore. Mrs. Henderson's name would be in a national newspaper. The school district would be mentioned. Everyone would know. Mr. Washington. Are you there? Yes, sorry. I need to think about this. I understand this is sensitive. But what happened to you represents a larger pattern we've been investigating. Socioeconomic discrimination in educational settings, particularly around college prep and standardized testing. She paused. We have documentation of at least 12 similar cases across 3 states in the past 2 years. 12 cases. I wasn't alone in this. There's something else, she continued. We've been contacted by Williams College. Apparently, Catherine Henderson's admission is being reviewed. My stomach dropped. Mrs. Henderson's daughter, the one who scored a 1520, who was supposed to be proof that her family deserved their success while mine deserved guidance toward community college. Reviewed for what? Anonymous tips suggested her application contained falsified volunteer hours and exaggerated leadership positions. Williams takes integrity violations very seriously, especially when they come to light alongside family scandals. I felt sick. This was spiraling beyond anything I'd intended. I'd wanted to prove Mrs. Henderson wrong, not destroy her children's futures. I don't want her daughter to get hurt because of what happened with me. That's admirable, Mr. Washington. But if Catherine Henderson committed application fraud, that's separate from what her mother did to you. The investigation will determine the facts either way. When I got home that evening, our answering machine was blinking with 7 messages. The first was from Dr. Williams at the college board with my official scores. The second was from my guidance counselor, Mr. Patterson, asking me to call him immediately. The third made my blood freeze. Marcus, this is Dr. Elizabeth Morrison, Superintendent of Jefferson County Schools. Jessica Morrison's mother. We need to schedule a meeting to discuss your allegations against Mrs. Henderson. Please call my office first thing tomorrow morning. The fourth message was from a lawyer offering free representation. The fifth was from Channel 7 News requesting an interview. The sixth was from Harvard's admissions office. Harvard. Calling our apartment in Maple Grove. My mom stood in the doorway, still wearing her Riley's Diner uniform, watching me listen to messages with growing alarm. Baby, what did you do? I played the Harvard message on speaker. Hello, Marcus. This is Dean Jennifer Price from Harvard College Admissions. We've received some information about exceptional circumstances surrounding your SAT administration. We'd very much like to speak with you about your college plans. Please call at your convenience. My mom's hand flew to her mouth. Harvard called our house. The seventh message was the one that made me understand how completely everything had changed. This is Rebecca Henderson. Mrs. Henderson's voice was barely controlled, shaking with rage. I don't know what game you think you're playing, but you've destroyed my family. Catherine's college career is ruined. The school board is forcing me into administrative leave. 23 years of service, and some bitter child decides to. The message cut off abruptly, but the damage was done. She'd called our home, violated every professional boundary left, and left a recorded threat. That night, as my mom and I sat at our kitchen table trying to process what was happening, she asked the question I'd been avoiding. Do you regret it? Speaking up. I thought about Mrs. Henderson's daughter, about Tyler's Northwestern dreams, about how a simple test had exploded into a national news story. I thought about the 12 other students Janet Chen mentioned, the ones who'd faced discrimination but stayed silent. No, I said finally. But I think the hardest part is just beginning. The next morning, Channel 7's news van was parked outside Jefferson High, and I realized my anonymous complaint had become everyone's business. Including Mrs. Henderson's husband, who was waiting by my locker with an expression that made my blood run cold. Mr. Henderson was a big man, the kind who'd probably played football in high school and still carried himself like he could tackle someone half his age. He stood next to my locker wearing a Jefferson High maintenance uniform, which explained how he'd gotten into the building before first period. His face was red, his fists clenched, and several students had already scattered when they saw him lurking in the hallway. You Marcus Washington. His voice carried the same authority as his wife's, but with an edge of barely controlled fury. Yes, sir. We need to talk. Now. Before I could respond, he grabbed my arm, not hard enough to bruise, but firm enough that I couldn't easily pull away. A few early arriving students were watching from down the hall, including Madison Chen, who had her phone out again. Mr. Henderson, you need to let go of me. My wife has worked at this school for 23 years. 23 years of staying late to help ungrateful kids, of spending her own money on classroom supplies, of caring more about education than the paycheck. His grip tightened slightly. And you destroyed all of that with one phone call. I reported what actually happened. What actually happened is that Rebecca tried to save you from embarrassing yourself. She's seen hundreds of kids like you come through those AP classes, kids who think they're smarter than they are, who aim too high and crash too hard. His voice was getting louder, and more students were gathering at a safe distance. She was trying to protect you. Madison Chen had definitely started recording now. Tyler Rodriguez appeared at the end of the hallway but didn't come closer. Even Jessica Morrison was there, looking uncomfortable but not leaving. She discriminated against me because of where I live and how much money my family has. Mr. Henderson's laugh was bitter. Discrimination? Kid, do you know what real discrimination looks like? Rebecca grew up in a trailer park in West Virginia. Her daddy was a coal miner who drank away his paycheck every Friday. She worked 3 jobs to put herself through college because nobody handed her anything. I stared at him. Mrs. Henderson with her perfect blazers and Cartier watch, I'd never imagined her growing up poor. She clawed her way out of that life by being realistic about her limitations and working twice as hard as everyone else. When she saw you heading for a fall, she tried to give you the same advice that saved her. His eyes were getting watery now, which somehow made him more frightening. And instead of being grateful, you decided to ruin her career. Mr. Henderson, I need you to let go of my arm. Catherine had to withdraw from Williams yesterday. Full scholarship, gone. 4 years of perfect grades, destroyed because some reporter decided to investigate our family based on your lies. His voice cracked. She's been crying for 2 days straight. Won't come out of her room. The hallway had gone completely silent except for the soft hum of Madison Chen's phone recording everything. I could see Mr. Peterson, the guidance counselor, hurrying down the hallway toward us, but he was still 50 feet away. I never wanted to hurt Catherine. But you did hurt her. You hurt my whole family because you couldn't handle some honest advice. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow felt more threatening than his earlier shouting. Rebecca's been put on administrative leave without pay. Do you know what that means for a family with 2 kids in college? Mr. Peterson finally reached us. Tom, you need to release that student immediately. Mr. Henderson looked at him with contempt. This is the kid who's destroying my wife's reputation, Jim. The one who's claiming she's some kind of racist because she tried to help him be realistic. I don't care what he did. You're an adult employee of this district physically restraining a minor student. Let him go right now, or I'm calling security. For a moment, I thought Mr. Henderson might refuse. His grip stayed firm, his eyes boring into mine with pure hatred. Then, slowly, his fingers loosened. This isn't over, Marcus. Actions have consequences, and yours are just getting started. As he walked away, I realized he was absolutely right. And the consequences were about to get much worse than I'd ever imagined. That afternoon, I discovered Mrs. Henderson had been busy during her administrative leave. I was walking to my car, walking to the bus stop, since our car was still broken, when Jessica Morrison caught up with me. Her usual perfectly composed expression had cracked, replaced by something that looked almost like panic. Marcus, we need to talk. Like, right now. She glanced around the parking lot nervously, then pulled me behind the dumpsters where no one could see us. The smell of rotting cafeteria food made my stomach turn, but Jessica seemed oblivious. Henderson's been calling parents, she said without preamble. Not just any parents. The important ones. School board members, PTA presidents, major donors. My heart sank. What's she telling them? That you're part of some coordinated attack on the school's reputation. That you conspired with that Washington Post reporter to create a fake scandal. Jessica's voice was getting higher. She's saying you recorded her illegally and edited the audio to make her sound discriminatory. That's insane. I have witnesses. She's claiming the witnesses are lying to protect you because you're all part of the same demographic. Jessica winced as she said it. Her words, not mine. The parking lot suddenly felt like it was tilting. Mrs. Henderson wasn't just defending herself, she was going on the offensive. There's more, Jessica continued. My mom got a call this morning. Henderson told her that you've been planning this whole thing since the beginning of the school year. That you've been deliberately trying to create incidents so you could claim discrimination. Your mom believes that. Jessica's silence was answer enough. She's also been calling college admissions offices, she said finally. Telling them that your SAT scores are under investigation for possible cheating, and that your character references from Jefferson High should be considered unreliable due to ongoing legal issues. My legs almost gave out. College admissions offices. She was trying to destroy my future before I even had a chance to build it. Which colleges? I don't know all of them. But my mom mentioned Harvard specifically. Jessica looked genuinely sorry now. Marcus, she's systematically trying to ruin you. That evening, the phone calls started. The first was from Dean Jennifer Price at Harvard, but her tone had changed completely from her earlier message. Marcus, I'm calling regarding some concerning information we've received about irregularities in your academic record. We'll need to postpone any admissions discussions until these matters are resolved. The second call was from Princeton. The third was from Yale. By the time Columbia called, I'd stopped answering the phone entirely. My mom found me sitting on our couch at 9 p.m., staring at the wall. Baby, what's wrong? You look like somebody died. I told her everything, Mrs. Henderson's campaign, the college calls, the systematic destruction of every opportunity I'd worked toward. By the time I finished, my mom's face had gone through about 6 different expressions, settling on something I'd never seen before, pure, protective rage. That woman thinks she can destroy my son's future because he had the courage to tell the truth. She stood up, grabbing her purse and car keys. Mom, our car doesn't work. Then I'll take the bus. Rebecca Henderson and I are going to have a conversation. Mom, no. You'll make it worse. She stopped at the door, turning to look at me with eyes that reminded me exactly where I'd got my stubborn streak. Baby, some battles you fight with words. Some you fight with lawyers. But some you fight with the truth, spoken loud enough that everyone can hear it. She pulled out her phone and dialed a number I didn't recognize. Janet? This is Patricia Washington, Marcus's mother. I understand you're writing a story about what happened to my son. Her voice was steady, controlled, and absolutely terrifying. Well, honey, I think it's time people heard the rest of the story. As I listened to my mom schedule an interview with the Washington Post, I realized Mrs. Henderson had made a critical miscalculation. She declared war on the wrong family. The Washington Post article went live at 6 a.m. on a Thursday morning. By 7:30, my phone had buzzed with 17 notifications, our landline was ringing non-stop, and there were 3 news vans parked outside Maple Grove Apartments. I knew because I was watching from behind our thin curtains as my mom got ready for her early shift at Riley's Diner, moving around our kitchen with grim determination. She'd spent 2 hours on the phone with Janet Chin the night before, methodically laying out every detail of Mrs. Henderson's retaliation campaign. "You sure you're ready for this, baby?" Mom asked, adjusting her uniform name tag. The article had quoted her extensively, and she'd used language that was polite but devastating. Professional but personal. She'd sounded exactly like what she was, a mother protecting her child. My phone buzzed with a text from Madison Chen, "Holy shit, Marcus. You need to see the comments section." The article's headline read, "When Guidance Becomes Discrimination, How One Teacher's Bias Sparked a National Conversation." But it was the 847 comments underneath that showed me how far this had spread. People were sharing their own stories, teachers who told them they weren't college material, counselors who'd steered them toward vocational programs based on their zip codes, administrators who'd questioned whether they belonged in advanced classes. Then I saw Mrs. Henderson's official response, published as a letter to the editor at 7:45 a.m. Marcus Washington has fabricated these allegations as part of a coordinated campaign to excuse his own academic shortcomings. In my 23 years of service, I have helped countless students from disadvantaged backgrounds achieve their dreams through realistic goal setting and appropriate guidance. Mr. Washington's vindictive accusations represent a troubling pattern of students who would rather claim victimhood than accept responsibility for their limitations. My hands shook as I read it. She was doubling down, publicly calling me a liar in a major newspaper. But then I scrolled to the comments under her letter, and something shifted. The first comment came from someone named David Torres, Mrs. Henderson told me the same thing in 2019. Asked if I was sure I belonged in AP chemistry because students from my neighborhood usually struggled with advanced sciences. I'm a sophomore at MIT now. The second was from Jennifer Walsh. Rebecca Henderson advised my daughter to consider more realistic options than pre-med because girls from single-parent households often find the sciences too challenging. My daughter starts medical school at Johns Hopkins next fall. The third comment made me sit down hard. I graduated from Jefferson High in 2018. Mrs. Henderson told me that kids from the trailer park should focus on practical skills instead of college prep. She said this in front of my entire AP English class. I just finished my master's degree at UVA. Thank you, Marcus Washington, for having the courage I didn't have. Sarah McKenzie. By 8:30 a.m., there were 43 similar stories in the comments. 43 students over the past 5 years who'd experienced the exact same conversation I had. The pattern was so clear, so documented, that even Mrs. Henderson's supporters in the earlier comments had gone silent. My phone rang. Harvard again. "Marcus, this is Dean Price. I owe you an apology." Her voice was completely different now, warm, embarrassed, professional. "We've spent the morning reviewing the Washington Post article and the documentation your mother provided. Mrs. Henderson contacted our office with what we now realize were deliberately misleading statements about your character and academic integrity." I couldn't speak. "Your SAT scores have been officially validated by the College Board as of 1 hour ago. 1600, perfect score, despite the discrimination you faced." She paused. "Marcus, Harvard College would very much like to discuss your future with us. Are you free to talk?" As I scheduled a call with Harvard admissions, I realized Mrs. Henderson's war against me had just backfired spectacularly. But something told me she wasn't finished fighting yet. The Harvard call lasted 47 minutes and changed everything I thought I knew about my future. Dean Price wasn't just apologetic, she was genuinely excited about my application. We talked about my essay on adversity, my perfect SAT score despite the circumstances, and something she called demonstrated resilience under pressure. "Marcus, I want to be completely transparent with you," she said near the end of our conversation. "What Mrs. Henderson did, both the original incident and her subsequent retaliation, has actually strengthened your candidacy significantly. Not because of sympathy, but because of how you handled it. The integrity you showed, the courage to speak up, the way you've conducted yourself throughout this investigation, those are exactly the qualities Harvard values." She paused, and I could hear papers shuffling on her end. "We'd like to offer you an early admission interview. Next week, if possible. And Marcus, I want you to know that Mrs. Henderson's phone calls to our office have been noted in your file as attempted interference with the admissions process. That's something we take very seriously." After hanging up, I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt exhausted. This whole situation had spiraled so far beyond what I'd intended when I first spoke up in that testing room. That's when my mom came home from her shift at Riley's with news that made my stomach drop. "Baby, we need to talk about something," she said, setting down her purse with shaking hands. "I got a call at work today. From Child Protective Services." The room went silent except for the hum of our old refrigerator. "CPS. What for?" "Someone filed a report claiming I'm an unfit parent. That I'm coaching you to make false accusations against school officials for financial gain." Her voice was steady, but I could see the fear in her eyes. "They're opening an investigation." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Mrs. Henderson. That's what I thought too. But the report came from an anonymous source, so they can't tell me who filed it. Mom sat down heavily at our kitchen table. "They're scheduling a home visit for tomorrow. They want to inspect our living conditions, interview you separately, review our financial records." This wasn't just about my college dreams anymore. Mrs. Henderson was going after my family. "They can't actually take me away from you, can they? If they find evidence of neglect or abuse, they can place you in temporary custody while they investigate further." She was trying to keep her voice calm, but I could hear the tremor underneath. "And our apartment, you know it's not perfect, baby. The heat doesn't always work, the kitchen faucet leaks, we don't have a lot of food in the refrigerator most days. I thought about our wobbly table, the thin walls, the way we sometimes had to choose between electricity and groceries. Things that were normal for us but might look like neglect to a social worker with a clipboard. There's something else, Mom continued. Mrs. Henderson isn't working alone anymore. Jessica Morrison told me at the diner today that her mother is backing Henderson completely. Dr. Morrison is using her position as superintendent to support whatever Henderson's doing. My heart sank further. Dr. Morrison had resources, connections, and a kind of institutional power that could make our lives miserable for years. And there's going to be a school board meeting tomorrow night. Public comment period about the recent allegations against district personnel. Mom's expression darkened. Henderson supporters are organizing to speak against you. They're calling it a character assassination of a dedicated teacher. I realized then that Mrs. Henderson hadn't just declared war on me, she turned this into a battle for the soul of Jefferson High School. And tomorrow night, I was going to have to face an entire room of people who thought I was a liar trying to destroy a good woman's career. The phone rang again. This time, it was a number I didn't recognize with a local area code. Is this Marcus Washington? Yes. This is Detective Sarah Martinez with Jefferson County Sheriff's Office. We need to schedule a time to speak with you about allegations of harassment and intimidation related to your complaint against Mrs. Henderson. My mouth went dry. What kind of allegations? Mrs. Henderson has filed charges claiming you've been stalking her family, making threatening phone calls, and orchestrating a campaign of harassment against her children. Detective Martinez's voice was professional but serious. These are serious accusations, Marcus. We need to get your side of the story. As I hung up, I realized Mrs. Henderson's final gambit was the most dangerous yet. She wasn't just trying to destroy my future anymore. She was trying to make me a criminal. The school board meeting was packed beyond capacity. I sat in the front row next to my mom and the ACLU lawyer who'd taken our case pro bono, watching as Mrs. Henderson supporters filed in wearing yellow ribbons, apparently their symbol of solidarity with a persecuted educator. Dr. Morrison called the meeting to order at 7 p.m. sharp. We're here tonight to address recent allegations against one of our veteran teachers. The board has completed its investigation and will now hear public comment before announcing our decision. Mrs. Henderson sat 3 rows behind me, flanked by her husband and daughter Catherine, who'd flown back from Williams specifically for this meeting. She looked smaller than I remembered, her usual polished appearance replaced by something more fragile. The first speaker was Mr. Chen, Madison's father. Rebecca Henderson has been a pillar of this community for over 2 decades. The idea that she would discriminate against any student based on their background is not only false, it's character assassination. Speaker after speaker defended Mrs. Henderson. Parents talked about her staying late to help their children. Former students described her encouragement and support. By the 8th testimonial, I was starting to doubt my own memory of what happened. Then Sarah Mackenzie took the microphone. My name is Sarah Mackenzie. I graduated from Jefferson High in 2018. She was a young woman about my age, wearing scrubs, apparently she worked at the county hospital. Mrs. Henderson told me that kids from the trailer park should focus on practical skills instead of college prep. She said this in front of my entire AP English class. The room went dead silent. I just finished my master's degree in nursing at UVA. But for 2 years after graduation, I believed what she told me. That I wasn't smart enough. That I didn't belong. Sarah's voice got stronger. Marcus Washington had the courage I didn't have. He spoke up when it mattered. One by one, 7 more former students took the microphone. David Torres from MIT. Jennifer Walsh, whose daughter was starting medical school. Others whose comments I'd read online. Each one told the same story, Mrs. Henderson questioning whether they belonged, suggesting they aim lower, using coded language about their backgrounds and circumstances. When it was my turn to speak, I walked to the microphone carrying a manila folder. Mrs. Henderson asked me if I was sure I belonged in that testing room. She was right to ask. I opened the folder and pulled out a document. I scored a perfect 1600 on the SAT, despite losing 11 minutes of testing time due to her interference. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Harvard called yesterday to offer me early admission. Princeton called this morning. Yale this afternoon. I looked directly at Mrs. Henderson. I do belong. I've always belonged. The only question is whether Jefferson High School belongs in my past or my future. Dr. Morrison stood up. The board has reached its decision. After reviewing testimony from multiple former students and documentation from the College Board investigation, we find that Mrs. Henderson violated district non-discrimination policies and federal testing protocols. Mrs. Henderson's face went white. Effective immediately, Rebecca Henderson is terminated from her position at Jefferson High School. Furthermore, the district will issue a formal apology to Mr. Washington and implement mandatory bias training for all staff. The room exploded into chaos. Mrs. Henderson's supporters were shouting, her critics were cheering, and somewhere in the middle, I felt something I hadn't expected, sadness for the teacher who'd forgotten that her job was to help students reach higher, not tell them they were reaching too high. 3 months later, I got a letter that completed the circle. It was from Mrs. Henderson, handwritten, not typed on school letterhead. Marcus, it read. I've spent these months thinking about what I did wrong. I grew up poor, like you. I was told I didn't belong, like you. Somewhere along the way, I forgot that my job was to prove those people wrong, not become one of them. I became exactly what I once fought against. You were right to speak up. I hope Harvard treats you better than I did. Rebecca Henderson. I never wrote back. But when I graduated valedictorian from Harvard 4 years later, I kept that letter in my desk drawer as a reminder. Sometimes the biggest victory isn't proving you belong, it's helping others remember that everyone does.